I went through that door because I did what Jesus told me. And when I got to Memphis, things did not go well with Young Life until the Lord brought to my attention some areas of my life that needed straightening out. And once I laid down those sins to the Lord, then the door that He took me through from Toccoa to Memphis to Young Life to be in ministry, once I had to lay down some sin, then there was a lot of blessing there. So much blessing that I ended up in Nashville and Birmingham, and a lot of good things happened through a series of events where I did what Jesus said. When I interviewed for a job at Impact to teach marriage seminars in Birmingham, my competition were two married couples who had each taught marriage seminars for 10 to 20 years apiece. Now, anybody that knows my life, which most of you do here, if not all of you, I'm happy to share with you at lunch. When at the interview, when the boss at Impact said, well, tell me a little bit about you, and I had to talk to him about how many marriages I've had and how, what my life has looked like over 10 or 15 years. I walked out of that interview going, no way is that ever going to happen. Look at my competition. Stick me in a jar of undrinkable water. It ain't going to happen. They offer me the job, and many years later, it's been a big blessing. Sometimes you have to lay down a sin. Sometimes when I interviewed at Impact, I had another dream on my heart. Sometimes you have to lay down a dream. To do what Jesus tells you, sometimes you have to lay down a sin. Sometimes you have to lay down a dream. And I'm single, so I date. Sometimes you have to lay down a person. It's not the right person for you. To follow Jesus, He may ask you, like His mother said, do what He tells you. He may ask you to do something, and it may involve laying down some things. It may involve laying down your lifelong dream, your childhood dream. It may involve you parting from a person. And it may involve you laying down some behaviors or issues in your life that you need to be obedient to the Lord in. If you do what Jesus says, the water of fear, and there's a lot of fear, I see a lot of fear. I have fear. The water of fear will turn into confidence. The water of addiction, there's all kinds of addiction in this world. Everything from obsessive compulsive behavior to the worst drug. The water of addiction will turn into wholeness and cover. The water of disappearing love, I read all kinds of research at Impact. So many people in this world feel like love is disappearing from them. Whether it's in a marriage or in a parent-child relationship, it just doesn't feel like what they thought life would be like with the kind of love that they thought would be there. The water of disappearing love will turn into a field of love and blessing. The water of illness will turn into a place of strength. As Isaiah 61 says, your ashes will turn to a crown of beauty. Your mourning will turn to the oil of gladness. Your spirit of despair, and there's a lot of that in Birmingham, will turn into a garment of praise. You know, there are so many people that, in the Bible even, that will just say, even though both the people I've picked don't fall into the category of do what Jesus says, but do what God says. You know, Mary said, do whatever he says. Joseph in the Old Testament, not in the New, but in the Old Testament, was the next to the youngest son of his father, whose name was changed to Israel. And Joseph had all these dreams. And in his dreams, he would go tell his brothers, there's a lot of guys in the room, I had this dream. And in this dream, basically as the dream would be interpreted, the 11 of y'all bowed down to me. And then he would have another dream. And the dream would be interpreted, well, the 11 of you guys are going to bow down to me. And then his daddy gave him a special coat, a coat of many colors. So you can imagine, with enough testosterone in that family, Joseph isn't being too liked anymore by his brothers. He's a little too something different. So they get mad about it, and they decide to kill him. That's a little different than today. We decide we're not going to talk to him anymore. Back in those days, they just were going to kill him. One brother talked him out of killing him, so they throw him in a pit, bloody his coat, take it back to his daddy, and tell his daddy that his son is dead. And as they're about to leave the pit, a caravan goes by of Ishmaelites, and they're going down to Egypt. And so they decide to sell him as a slave there. And now, so far, you know, Joseph, you know, you might say is not really doing what Jesus said, but Joseph's life is taking a bad turn. So now he's down in Egypt as a slave, and now he's in Potiphar's house, which is like, in America, it would be a cabinet member of Obama. So he's in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife is thinking Joseph is looking pretty good. So one occasion she says, Joseph, I think I'd like to warm your chili. That would be the Alabama phrase, as opposed to the Bible phrase. Joseph says, no, thank you. So then comes another day, and she says, I think I'd like to warm that chili. And he says, no, thank you. And she grabs his cloak, and in the process of leaving, she gets his clothes, basically, and he runs out of Potiphar's house in his underwear. So she yells, he did this to me, and he did that to me, and he's a bad person. And of course, Potiphar thought Joseph was great, but how could he deny what his wife is saying? So Joseph innocently is thrown in prison. So let's go back to a little point in that story. He's in Potiphar's household, and Mary said, do what my son says. Now, Mary and Jesus aren't around in this scene, but basically Joseph, choosing not to be with Potiphar's wife, did what God said. And immediately, he got thrown in prison. Now he's down in prison, and he's got favor down there. And although it's not a prison like an American prison, it's not even like a Peru prison. Now, the Peru prison that we see on TV today is bad. But go back a couple, 3,000 years, and it's a whole lot worse. A whole lot worse than a Peruvian prison. So Joseph is in there, and he's making the best of it. And at every turn in the book of Genesis, he is doing what God says. So these two other guys get thrown down in there, and he interprets their dreams. And one of them gets released, and he goes back up and tells Pharaoh there's a guy down there that can interpret dreams. And then Joseph goes up and interprets Pharaoh's dream, and Pharaoh says, you're right, and I'm going to make you second in command of all of Egypt. There's a great famine in the world. Joseph and all his brothers are starving to death. The only food in that part of the world is in Egypt. They come down to Egypt. There's a family reunion.